Hi everyone, my name's Matt Williams. I'm the Access Fellow at Jesus College in Oxford, and I'm a politics tutor for the University of Oxford, and I've been teaching politics there for over a decade for about 25 of the university's colleges and private halls. And today I'm going to share with you my top tips about how to think a little bit more like an Oxford student so that you can enhance your thinking skills. My primary message is that actually you don't need to progress your thinking skills to some sort of perhaps unobtainable elite level. You actually need to regress. You need to go back to the way that you used to think as a child, because children have got it sorted out. They have the best, albeit raw, but the best thinking skills around. So when it comes to talking about what's known as metacognition, in other words, thinking about how you think, we should take lessons from children because they've got it absolutely sorted out. And there's three particular components that I want to talk about specifically. Those are humility, curiosity, and fun. Okay? Because those are the three components of thinking skills that young children, toddlers for example, tend to evince perfectly, and that, if you want to think a little bit more like a student at one of the world's best universities, those are the sorts of things you need to think about. So let's start with humility. Socrates put it better than anyone ever could. The only thing I know with absolute certainty is that I don't know anything at all. What he meant by that is that we don't have access to absolute truth. There are no oracles on this earth that are able to tell us what reality truly entails. So everything that we think we know is actually a relative truth rather than an absolute truth. Relative in the sense that it's sufficient for us to understand for now within our own sort of human community, but it doesn't actually give us a precise indication of what true reality is. Take, for example, mathematics. Whatever you determine through various sort of mathematical transformations will be true, but only within mathematics. It won't be true of the physical universe because we simply lack sufficient data on, for example, how the link between quantum mechanics and gravitational physics operates. So it's a relative rather than an absolute truth. Take, for instance, gravity. Physicists tend to use 9.81 meters per second squared as a way of approximating how fast an object will fall towards the center of the Earth. So it will gather 9.81 meters per second in speed every single second. Now that is, as physicists know, an approximation. It's a simplification of the relationship between the pull of the Earth's core and the rotational centrifugal force of the spinning of the planet. But it doesn't take into account things like air resistance, it doesn't take into account the relative position of that falling body on perhaps thicker or thinner parts of the crust that might affect the specific pull of the Earth's core. So it is true within mathematics, but it's not true within the more sort of deep sense of that word of truth. Okay, so we need to start with a degree of humility. We don't have absolute certainty about anything really, except, as Socrates said, of our own ignorance. And to my mind, some of the most ignorant people are the people that don't know what they don't know. In other words, they are so unaware of how little it is possible to know that they tend to be supremely arrogant and self-assured. That means they don't discuss ideas, they are not empathetic, they don't listen to other people because they assume, incorrectly, that they've got everything sorted out already. That is a very dangerous place to start from in any academic discipline, because you're coming at it with a degree of hubris, a degree of delusion that you are the oracle, you are the missing person that we've been looking for all of this time who happens to know everything about the structuring of the universe. But you don't. You might have a particularly advanced set of intellectual tools that help you obtain relative truth, but nonetheless, the more you study a subject, the more you'll realise how much complexity there is and how much more you could know. And that's certainly been my experience, that every single day I've been working at Oxford University, I've become even more humble. Okay? So the first thing to note is that you need a degree of humility. And children tend to be a bit of a mixture on that record, but they at least are aware that there's an awful lot of stuff they don't know. And that's a good place to start in any academic endeavour. Open-mindedness, willingness to talk, and empathy, talking to other people with respect and trying to understand what they think and how their mind works. So humility is the first one. The second one is curiosity. And toddlers are supremely good at this. And I've got a toddler of my own, 3-year-old called Teddy, and he asks me the best questions you could possibly imagine. All of the classics, why is the sky blue? But then some slightly sort of different ones, like why is Tom from Tom and Jerry a cat? Now this says a lot about some of the problems with me, but I stayed up for a good couple of hours in the night trying to work that out, trying to sort of put together, what is the cultural significance of cats chasing mice, and why would they have animated this sort of particular confrontation between cats and mice? Anyway, he just asks really, really good questions. Now, what a good question is, of course, is subject to debate in itself, but what we need to think about is just having that sort of endless curiosity, not taking things for granted, looking at the world around us with that sort of giddy perceptiveness that toddlers come with, because they've not experienced reality before, so for them it's just endlessly complex and confusing and wonderful, and that's the sort of degree of perceptiveness that you want to try and unlock in yourself. So what I would suggest you do is to just try and almost, obviously you can't do this literally, but almost sort of forget everything you think you know and go out into the world around you and just start asking very simple questions in the way that a toddler might. Why are trees so tall? How are they capable of lifting all of that water up off the ground? Bear in mind that a metre cube of water weighs a tonne. So what you're looking at is a huge upside down waterfall dragging huge columns of extremely dense, heavy liquid up out of the earth. That's amazing. But we would probably usually walk past a tree without really giving it the due respect it deserves, despite it being, if you like, the whales of the land. These are incredible mega flora that we just tend to ignore. So why are trees able to live? Is a sort of toddlerish question you might want to ask. Why do trees have different types of leaves? Would be another great question. Where do trees get their mass from? How is it that they're capable of growing so large? The beautiful truth of that is they get it from thin air, mostly. Most of the mass you see, even on an enormous tree, has just come from capturing carbon from thin air, which is simply mind-blowing. So what I suggest you do is, like a toddler, just look around and with that sort of giddy curiosity, ask yourself lots of questions about stuff that you might otherwise have taken for granted. And trees are a great place to start because, we tend to just walk past them and not give them any heed, but they are so wonderful, and they're just an example of the incredible things that you will encounter if you start to just regress your mind to that sort of toddler state of endless and boundless and giddy curiosity. Now the third thing, and this underpins all of them, is fun. Toddlers really don't do anything unless they're having fun, and that's certainly been my experience with my 3-year-old. Unless he's having fun, he just refuses to cooperate. So you similarly need to try and enjoy what you're doing. Academia doesn't need to be this sort of terribly serious discipline where we all chain ourselves to desks and read terribly thick tomes and sort of stroke our chins and think and talk and it's all very serious. No, actually some of the most powerful academics, the people that have progressed the furthest, have enjoyed themselves. They've found what it is that motivates them about learning more about the universe, and they've harnessed that positive energy to take themselves much further. Because if you are positively motivated, if you're having fun, you're going to be more energized, you're going to be more motivated, you're going to be the sort of person that doesn't just sort of grudgingly slop out of bed on a morning to try and find out new things. You will take a leap out of bed. You will want to find out more about your chosen subject, to find out what else could be going on. So what concretely could you be doing to be a more humble and curious and fun-loving thinker? Well, I would start by, first of all, just exploring the sandbox around you, the metaphorical sandbox. So just sort of going out into, around your where you live, and just sort of asking questions like a toddler might. And then start to sort of gravitate towards questions that are particularly focused on a subject that you're interested in. So for example, if you are interested in physics or engineering, you might want to ask yourself a question like, well, does my phone get a bit heavier when I download a new app onto it? Turns out, looked it up, it does. And you might be interested to find out why that is. But that's the sort of thing I'm talking about, just a sort of curious question that starts to gravitate towards a particular subject that you may be interested in. If you're a historian, or you're an anthropologist, or you're a political scientist, again, you could look at your phones and sort of think about the logos that are used. Why does Why does the Apple company have an apple with a bite taken out of it as its symbol? The story behind that is tragic and fascinating. It turns out that the first person to develop an electronic computer, a man called Alan Turing, who developed Colossus at Bletchley Park in order to help crack the Enigma code of the Nazis, he killed himself by extracting cyanide from apple pips, and he killed himself because he'd been sentenced to chemical castration on account of him being homosexual, and in those days it was illegal to be homosexual, and he was ordered to be castrated, and in order to avoid that particular punishment, he tragically killed himself. This absolutely towering, endlessly significant figure for human development, losing his life in such a pitiful way. And Steve Jobs was so touched and moved by this story, allegedly, although I haven't heard this confirmed, that he developed the symbol of the apple with a bite taken out of it for the company. So, as I say, just even daily things that you touch and feel all the time. Think about them, ask questions, try and relate it back to your subject, go and do some reading about it, go and listen to some podcasts about it, go and watch some lectures on YouTube about it, engage, explore, but for goodness sake, always think like a toddler, always think for yourself. Don't let someone authoritatively tell you this is the answer, because remember what I said at the start, they probably don't know what they don't know. They don't know what they are ignorant of. So you need to go at every particular problem with a degree of open-mindedness and humility. But for goodness sake, have some fun, because if you're having fun, you'll go way further. And the Oxford students and the academics I work with, they love what they do. They don't do it because they feel compelled to do it. They don't do it because they're aiming for something else in the future, like power or money. They do it because at root, they care about it. And if you care about what you do, you'll go much further with it. Grand. Thank you so much for listening. I wish you all the best of luck in whatever you pursue in your life. But remember, you can't go far wrong if you think a bit more like a child does. Thanks.